Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Well, it is always very difficult to be the last to speak. You are already overwhelmed by the information our colleagues from various countries shared with us. Nevertheless, I would still like to share our story with you, as almost all the heads of regional employment services of Russia are present here. And I'm with the employment service since 1992, and I've come a long way, so I have some important pieces of information to share with you. During the period of the time of transition of Russian Federation to the market type of economy, our state had to recognize the presence of unemployed people in our country. It was reflected in a law that was made on the 19th of April 1991 on the employment in Russian Federation. We suppose that our service was created in 1991. It has not been long since we were trying to address this problem of unemployment, but nevertheless, we may define several stages in this process. The federal law made a basis for establishment and implementation of state policy on the labor market. We created the Federal Service on Employment and established the infrastructure and tools to regulate the employment of population and addressing the problem of unemployment. So over this short period, we completed 5 important stages, approximately 5 years per stage, stages of development and establishment. We employed both centralized and decentralized approaches, solving the problems in the domain of employment. So the first stage was basically establishment of the system. We outlined the national strategy on the policy, and I would like to read it out thoroughly. Forming the regulatory basis, creating the structure of non-government and government employment services. During this period, we involved a lot of foreign experts to provide us consultations. Many employees of the federal service went abroad to learn from other countries. As in Russia, we did not have experience in addressing the problem of unemployment or combating the unemployment, but all the progressive technologies that were learned by the employees and the mentors of our service were reflected in the first programs that were created on this topic. These programs were rather progressive. They were mainly addressed not the problem of unemployment, but basically they were aimed at prevention the unemployment. We tried to create more jobs, vocational training. We paid a lot of attention to self-employment, and the Public Employment Service initiated reform in the tax legislation that provided certain benefits and tax breaks for the young individual entrepreneurs in in certain types of activities. To the right, you may see the main directions and topics of our activity. Forecasting the demand and supply for labor resources, publishing set of normative and regulatory documents, developing regional and various types of programs divided by industries. So here we see an example of decentralization. Of course, we paid a lot of attention to the unemployed and to the least protected groups of population, such as women, the youth, and so on. The second stage. Here we speak about the time from 1996 till 2000. The main features of this stage were development of new services and trends in terms of employment. The regional labor markets were featured by big diversity in the types of employment and the various parameters of the unemployment in terms of its duration, territorial disproportion, and so on. At the stage of establishment, private employment services were mostly provided by foreign agencies that brought in a lot of technologies, and our Russian agencies learned a lot from them. As to the second stage, by the end of it, the functions of public employment services were transferred to the ministerial level. Within the ministry, we created a big department responsible for the support provided to the unemployment, and it reported to both the head of this topic within the ministry. On the other hand, their activity was controlled by the local administration. Why the federal function was transferred to the ministerial level? According to the considering the economic development of the regions of Russian Federation, the income generated by the regions of Russian Federation was hugely unbalanced. There were very few regions that were donors, and thus we tried to redistribute this income and provide more resources to the regions in need. However, it was not sufficient to provide the regions with all the means and support the unemployed. These issues led us to the third stage of the development of our service, the stage from 2001 till 2006. There we saw the global restructuring of the whole system of the employment services. Closing the Federal Employment Fund and including the corresponding item into the federal budget, and creating the territorial regional services on the regional level. So we divided the management structure according to the territorial organization of Russian Federation. We provided the planning and distribution of financing for the implementation of our programs, provided control over defining the sizes of benefits and scholarships, and provided support in terms of employment. In 2003, we developed a new concept, a new approach to address the issues of employment that further were followed by changing the law on employment. And basically this concept actually outlines the principles that we're acting by right now. The next stage took place from 2007 till 2011. Well, here we started and completed the first stage of administrative reform to define the powers of the administrative powers between the federal and regional level. This reform was aimed to take place during several years. In 2006, we launched the first stage of this reform. The reform itself was aimed at improving the quality and accessibility for state and public services, deregulation, and improving the efficiency of local administration.
The main aspects of this period was quotas, job quotas for foreign workers, job quotas for migrants, and also in this period which coincided with the financial crisis, we had to deal with the consequences of this crisis, which hits on Russia as well. So what can we say? First of all, to make the administrative reform efficient and to develop it in a homogeneous manner in all the regions, we developed the administrative instructions on public service provision to the population. We also introduced a set of activities which were developed in the crisis period, first of all, aimed at providing an enhanced state, enhanced public welfare and social insurance, and in time of crisis the government slightly increased the welfare payments. We also developed and carried out several monitorings, including the monitoring of displaced workers and the monitoring of regional program implementation, which covered not only those programs which had been developed for public service provision, to unemployed, but also and mainly the regional programs aimed at reducing the tension and stress in the regional labor markets. We set up local advice centers for all the people who have been hit by the financial crisis, and also launched the Job in Russia information portal on the web. In the end of this period, we managed to demonstrate in the PES a certain we managed to demonstrate certain independence and autonomy at the regional and local levels, because it was the regions who were deciding on the list of actions from those proposed by the federal government aimed at the displaced workers. So not only to the unemployed, but also to the displaced. Within public service work and vocational training, internships, and in this period, the Public Employment Service demonstrated its capability to operate autonomously and independently in the crisis situation. And thanks to their work, in 2011 we achieved those labor market indicators and targets in terms of employment, unemployment rates, and labor market stress. We managed to reduce them to the pre-crisis levels. So the Russian PES have demonstrated their best, and they went on to the fifth stage of the reform, starting from 2012, and in this period, the employment centers at the regional government were given some additional authority from the federal level, together with the funding from the regional budget. Also, in this period, we developed special purpose programs to assist in employment to the vulnerable groups of population, and develop some special programs to maintain stability in the most labor distressed regions. To ensure the completeness and accessibility of the public employment services, we decided to move away from the federal instructions to the service quality standards. We recommend certain activities on increasing the labor market flexibility, and we propose and pass the legislative changes, including the changes in the labor code, because the labor flexibility also means that we need to legitimize the flexible employment formats. Professional mobility gets a very high position on the agenda. We heard yesterday that now there is a portal in Russia, which is called Job in Russia, employment portal, and it is now being transformed into its second version with the new technologies aimed at increasing the labor mobility. But we understand that increasing the labor mobility has less to do with the efficiency of public services. It has more to do with the economic and social attractiveness of this or that region, which makes people move between the regions. And of course, the demographic situation in Russia is not an easy one, because the population is aging, and the economic crisis has affected the increase of the population, and the new generation does not replace those labor resources that are being displaced gradually from the market. That is why we have to engage a lot of migrant workers. However, we give high priority to the national labor resources. So what can we say about the existing public employment system in Russia? As of now, we have 2,081 employment centers in Russia. Starting from 2012, the number of employment centers has been reduced by 350. Some people say that this is the cost structure optimization. Some people say that now we can use mobile employment centers. But I personally think that, and here you can see that from the slide, I think that there are other reasons to that reduction of the number of employment centers. So the first line in this table is the economically active population in absolute figures, and the share of the total population. Then the next green line is the number of people who do not have a job but who have sought it actively, calculated according to the ILO methodology. That's the number of unemployed. And next line is the number of unemployed registered in the employment service and the number of vacant positions. So these figures are given for the period from 2012 to 2014, because that was the last iteration of the administrative reform. And we see that in terms of the numbers, the number of people registered in the employment centers has reduced, which may make the regional governments falsely think that they don't need so many employment centers to provide the employment services to the people. We also observe an increase in the number of vacant jobs, available jobs, and we observe the reduction of tension and stress on the labor market. So, based on this data, we may conclude that this cost structure of cost structure optimization was quite a justified one. And we also observe quite a wide gap between the number of unemployed people and the unemployment rate, between those indicators calculated using the ILO methodology and those indicators that we have for the actual labor market. How can we explain this gap? Well, first of all, we need to understand the place of the public employment service in the labor market. There is a certain discrepancy between what the public employment service can give to the Russian population and what the Russian population, the unemployed, expect to have from the Russian PES. Also, another factor is the quality of the open jobs provided by the employers to the employment centers. Usually that's manual labor, low paid and unqualified. Next factor is the quality of qualification of those unemployed who register with the employment center. Many of them, the majority, have quite a low qualification, medium to low, let's put it this way. Of course, highly qualified people, when they are displaced, when they lose their job, they go to the private recruitment agencies. The time is running up, so please round up. Okay, I'm wrapping up now. I also wanted to mention our job portal, Job in Russia. In the top right corner, you see the number of visitors on this portal as of the 15th of September 2014. Next important thing is that the Russian Federation, for the first time in history, has developed and started the implementation of the employment development state program for employment development. The program has 3 sub-programs, and they are designed for the period from 2013 until 2020. And those programs and sub-programs lay out the key priorities for further development of the Russian PAS, of which, first of all, we need to enhance the role of the public employment service as a mediator between the job seekers and the employers looking for new workers with a certain skill set. In the end of my presentation, I would like to say that we have here a lot of specialists, colleagues, practitioners involved in implementing the employment programs in Russia, as well as researchers specializing in theory of the labor market and labor economy. And I'm looking forward to the next presentations, which will give new directions for our work. And coming back to that remark about the esteemed ND, I have started my presentation with the words esteemed colleagues, and I would like to finish with thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you.